President Cyril Ramaphosa has moved South Africa to adjusted COVID-19 lockdown alert level 2, effective today. Most political parties have welcomed the eased regulations, allowing for more people at political gatherings ahead of the November municipal polls. Well, to speak to us about this latest move, we're joined by Professor Thuli Madonsela, who is the Law Trust Chair in Social Justice and Law Professor at the University of Stellenbosch. Prof. Madonsela, good evening, and thank you for your time tonight. Look, we're looking at a global situation where many countries have had to hold elections and where some have successfully held elections under COVID-19. So the situation in South Africa in that respect is not unique. But at the same time, there's serious concerns that I think, would need to be attended to in terms of whether this election will be considered one that is free and fair.
Certainly, Kathy. Good evening to you and to the viewers, and thank you for the privilege. There are concerns about the extent to which an election can be free and fair in a situation where there is a lockdown. Justice Moseneke thought it would not be free and fair, but he conducted his research at a time when we were at the height of COVID-19 and the lockdown regulations. Since then, there has been a liberalization of the playing field, and more recently, the president made additional concessions that will make it a little bit easier for people to campaign.
Ultimately, the Moseneke's report and its findings have not been nullified by where we are right now. Many of those concerns still very much remain intact, and concerns about the elections potentially being this big super spreader event. How can that report be used to strengthen how elections will be rolled out this year, you think?
I believe that the best that can be done would be for the presidency to reconsider the numbers. I don't know what is the science behind the numbers. For example, it's been moved now to 250 indoors and 500 outdoors. I really don't know what is the science, and nobody has ever taken us into confidence to indicate that when there's 500 people, there's less opportunity for infections than when there's 250. What is even amazing is this 250 does not take into account places like auditoriums. If you look at the CRC church, for example, their auditorium takes more than 6,000 people, and there might be a church that ordinarily takes 500 people, and the regulations are saying in that case, then you should only fill it up to half. But I don't understand, why are you treating a big auditorium the very same way that you are treating a small church? And therefore there's more room for government to wiggle. And if people also could perhaps take up the opportunity to vaccinate a lot more faster than they have done so, there would also be more room for saying there is quite a significant amount of people that have been vaccinated, and therefore the risk of COVID spreading is diminishing.
What do you think it's going to take in an election year like this, where the contestation is so high, for the elections to be held and for the outcome of that election and the process of that election to not be as contested as perhaps is already indicated? So do you think that there's steps that can be put in place right now to mitigate against that?
I honestly think that the only thing that could be done might be to review the numbers. That said, Kathy, we must understand that throughout the COVID-19 pandemic, we've heard by-elections, and they happened under the very same circumstances that we are going to hold the national elections, and therefore it's not entirely unfair that we're going to elections in this way. I also think that one of the considerations that may have been made around postponing elections is that we really don't know how long will we have COVID-19, and we also don't know what the future holds in terms of other pandemics, and therefore we just have to learn to operate in these circumstances. What could have helped would have been if parties really, really wanted to stop the elections. They should have gone to Parliament and requested a constitutional amendment, because we're operating within a space where the Constitution as it stands does not have a clause that allows for missing the elections deadline.
Of course, one of the things that we're also seeing coming out of international research are some of the declining attitudes towards democracy and even towards democratic institutions. And South Africa is also experiencing its own levels of public trust declining in some of these institutions. What do you think that means for this year's election?
Of course, when there's a decline in public trust and participation in democratic processes, it means then that democracy is under threat, because it doesn't mean people are not interested in what democracy can deliver. It just means that if they're not interested in the electoral processes, then they'll take it elsewhere. They'll take it into protests. They'll take it into what we saw when somebody gaslighted them during the after former President Zuma had been incarcerated. They were gaslighted to use that avenue. And therefore, it means people become vulnerable to being gaslighted to take their democratic concerns outside the system. What I do think we can all do is use the media a lot more. What it would mean then is the media will have to open up space beyond the big parties to make sure that people's messages are aired. And then I would say to those who want to be elected, whether they are independents or they are political parties, they should also use social media a lot more than they've done before. Mindful, though, of course, of the booby traps of fake news and all sorts of shenanigans that take place in social media.
Do you think that there are specific countries that South Africa can be learning from in this moment in terms of how to get through this election crisis, or not crisis, but election process as seamlessly as possible?
Well, certainly, there's been countries in Europe that have held their elections without any challenges. I wouldn't point to America because of what happened at the end of their last president's term, but there are European countries that have held free and fair elections regardless of the COVID-19 restrictions.
University of Stellenbosch's Professor Thuli Madonsela, thank you so much for your time tonight.